All right, guys, today we're going to go over some very basics on design for the restorations that you're going to be doing in inlay, onlay, and crown lay. These are kind of my go-to restorations in my practice, and they're ultra conservative adhesive bonded ceramic restorations using either lithium disilicate, lucite reinforced materials, or resin nanoceramics. So the first step is to set the case up right. Let's do an inlay first. So you select the tooth, select inlay. Let's just say we're going to do Emax here. If you do Emax, you want a medium or high translucency restoration. And we're going to start scanning. The single most important thing is your first second of scanning, and that has to be from a top-down view, okay? So if you activate the camera prematurely and you enter into the mouth and you accidentally scan from a kind of crooked angle, it's going to kind of mess up your digital model once it renders. Everything from there on is just simple rotational-based scanning. Nothing else really matters. You just kind of overlap your scans and try to capture as much information as needed, but nothing that is not really needed. So you don't necessarily, for such a small restoration like this, need to go, say, all the way to the cross arch. Now, if you hold the camera still or hold down the bottom button, you could take these HD snapshots, preferentially from the path of insertion of the restoration. You could take multiple. And here, I just missed that distal interproximal of tooth number 20, so I just captured that real quick. Okay, model is rendered, and the next step is going to be, let's just take a look at the color. Now, color looks fantastic on the HD snapshots on real teeth, but maybe not so much on Typodon. The opposing, same thing, straight down occlusal view for your first 1 second of scanning with this scanner, and capture the buccal in great detail. In the occlusal surfaces, the lingual, you really don't need the straight lingual. Let's take a look, let's rotate that. You see, you could leave those voids there. Now, if you're sending to the lab and you're not milling in-house, some labs want you to fill in those linguals so they could 3D print those models, and they somehow don't know how to fill those holes, or their CAD software will give them errors. Now you're on to the bites. Focus on one arch at a time and go slow. So you don't want to be going wicked fast with your bite scans, because you need this computer to have time to think to merge in those models into the buccal bite scan. And as you can see here, we're going to click this little icon here. We got the green dot. That means we're good with the articulation. We could see the occlusal marks on 20 and 18. Now, let's just pretend we didn't get an automatic articulation. All you do is drag the blue buccal bite up to the top and get it kind of lined up as close as you can, and then drag the mandibular scan up to that merge scan, clicking on a cusp tip and dragging it to the same cusp tip on the blue bite. So there you go. Not a big deal. Sometimes clinically we don't get automatic articulations. So now, the first thing that you need to do is go to the margin tab and set the path of insertion for this restoration, which actually does determine mill path. And we'll go over that maybe later, but it is important to get this lined up so the restoration kind of will drop right out of the screen and fall into that prep. 3 ways you can mark your margin. Paint works really well with inlays. You just literally kind of sloppily circumscribe the area, then hit the paint icon one more time, and then it goes and finds that margin. Trace is an automatic kind of margin marking feature that you could then, in this instance, I'm using add segments. By the way, all the margin tools except move, you have to actually hit the icon again to activate. With move, you just drag. And then lastly, there's trace. Trace has no automatic feature whatsoever. So basically where you click, that margin line is going, which comes in handy clinically if you have super subgingival preparations that you can't really rely on any automatic margin finding ability to capture. So you can just go to that manual trace. Okay, so then we have add segments. Add segments will give you that error if you don't click well before the defect and well after the defect onto the lasso line. Then it will heal it. You could turn on and off your margin. You could hit that icon there that turns high areas green. I don't find that very much helpful, except every now and then I could see a little error. Then you have to do this extra step where you circumscribe the whole tooth in green. This is super important. This icon right here with like a scissor on it. Click that icon, go ahead and circle the entire tooth from the occlusal view. Only need to do this for inlays and onlays, and what that's doing is determining the path, kind of the size of the tooth, what cusps need to be where. Then you're going to go onto the plan tab. If you see up there on the top, the menu bar just goes from setup, scan, margin, plan, then design. Design tab, that's our initial proposal, and we have some insanely powerful tools to tinker with this. First thing I do is get my marginal ridges lined up with rubber tooth. Okay, so my marginal ridges are lined up, and yes, I do see that kind of somebody obliterated the tooth number 20 in front of it. Now I'm using the define feature to kind of accentuate some anatomy. Trim the trim icon to just look at the tooth, turning on the occlusion. You can see those icons highlighted orange there. And now I'm going to adjust that occlusion by going to the occlusal refinement tab and circling those down. That's going to give me a little thin area there, but I'm okay with that. There we go. That is the inlay in a nutshell. Now, before you mill this sucker, we're going to put the sprue right on the mesial. We're going to sim it in detail mode. And we're going to look at how it fits by turning the model on and looking at the under surface and then slicing it, looking for binding spots along the axial walls, looking at our cement spacer, our margin ramp, and all this stuff we're going to go over in class. So we're pretty good. For inlays, I don't like my inlays to fit really tight because I don't want them to act as a wedge as I'm trying to seat that restoration. So I'm going to decrease my margin ramp to around 0.1 so that I don't get kind of pressure on that occlusal margin as I'm seating it. And that's going to actually decrease the amount of surface area that's closed at the margin to make it just a tiny, tiny little bit, which also allows the cement to vent out the occlusal surface as you seat that restoration so you can ensure you get full seating. Now we're going to sim it in standard mode, and we're going to look and see, and you could see in